Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another compelling session of OLC4O Term 2B, brought to you by WASA Distance Education Center. I'm your instructor, Mike Laverty. Thanks to be on the airwaves with you today. Today's date is Wednesday, May the 24th, 2023. Today's class marks number 22, so we're on class 22, and we are working our way through Unit 3. Today's class, we will be looking at assignments 34 and 35. But of course, before we do that, I'll do some hopefully some interesting and compelling material to kind of get your minds activated onto the material to come. So yeah, compelling, that's one of my favorite words, right? So when something is compelling, it makes you think, you can't get your mind off it. So hopefully I can live up to my my adjective, and today's class will be quite compelling, and maybe more importantly to you, will help you to continue to work through your assignments as you progress through this course. So here's some important dates. So we are in term 2B, the final term of this. Sorry, the second last, because there is a summer term to come. So this is week number 6 of term 2B. There are, just a little reminder, you've got 9 weeks in total. So getting very close to the end here, right? So not much time left to submit your work and figure things out. So that's why I like to give these reminders every class. So any potential grads out there, your deadline for submitting work is June the 9th. So so you submit all your work by June the 9th, and then a final exam could be arranged after that fact. But the key thing to keep in mind is you need to have all your work in before that June 9th date. If you're not graduating this year, you have a deadline of June 16th for submitting your work in this course. And then you could submit your application or just request a final exam to be written after that date. But if you can't make that deadline work, you have to re-register for the course and take the summer term and start all over again. Okay, so I don't want to see anybody get into that situation where you have to start the term all over again and submit your work all over again. So now is the time to start handing in your assignments. Any questions on that, you can reach out and speak with me or another staff member here at WASA. So we got Unit 1 and Unit 2 wrapped up. We are continuing our discussion of Unit 3, and we will spend all of Week 6 and probably most of Week 7 finishing off Unit 3. Then we'll get on to Unit 4. And then, a big part of Unit 4, just to kind of forecast a little bit, is your literacy portfolio. So it's just a good thing to remind everybody out there that when you take this course, you have to organize not all of your submissions, but it's good to keep your assignments handy and make sure they're all in one spot that you can track them down easily, because at the end of Unit 4, you'll put together a portfolio that'll be a selection of the assignments that you submitted in this course, and you have to know where your assignments are to put them together into a folder. That could be a physical folder, it could be a digital one. And then hopefully Week 9 we'll have at least a couple of classes to go over the final exam specifically. So thank you for tuning in. OLC does broadcast live Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday from 1 p.m. to 1:50 p.m. Central Standard Time. You can always phone the studio at 1-800-465-7144 or 1-807-737-4017 with phoning in with any questions or comments that you might have. That's listening at 91.9 FM or Bell ExpressVu channel 972. And you can also listen and watch live on the Zoom application by going to zoom.us, clicking on the Join Now button, and entering my meeting ID, 417-6699-799. So every teacher on WASA, every teacher who works at WASA, we have many means to reach out to our students, and I think most, if not all of us, have that ability to to broadcast through the radio and through Zoom. And then we also have our classes on YouTube. Please keep in mind that you can go on YouTube on your own time. My YouTube channel is Laverty Wasa, Laverty space WAHSA. And you can also have these videos uploaded to a USB stick or sent to you some other way, so you can watch them if you don't have a reliable internet connection. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. So you can reach out to me directly at mlaverty@nnecschools.org. That's MLAVERTY@nnecschools.org. Find me on Facebook, Laverty Wasa, Laverty space WAHSA. And phone the Wasa office toll-free at 1-800-667-3703. That's our toll-free long-distance number. And just your suggested progress at this point, you should have Units 1 and 2 pretty much wrapped up, moving on to the assignments in Unit 3, and should have read the first 6 chapters of Jimmy Comes Home. Right? So that's just your suggested progress. If you're 5 to say, 5.5 weeks through the course, that's where you should be. If not, it's going to get really stressful for you as you try to sort of like cram in all these assignments, right? So I don't want to add any more stress to people's lives, but you do have to keep up a good pace with the course, especially with there only being about 3 weeks left here in the term. So very important you stay on top of your progress. So here's today's lesson. We'll look at the words of the day. We'll have a look at today's headline, and then we'll look at assignment 34 and assignment 35 from Unit 3. Assignment 35 is a really big one. There's a lot of marks there, so we won't be able to do all of it today, and we'll do some of it today and some of it tomorrow's class, and then maybe even some of it on Monday, because it's a lot of stuff to unpack there, but definitely have time for 34 and parts of 35. Your success criteria here is to review the writing process as it relates to composing a journal entry. This first one was actually from last class, so didn't know how much time we'd have, but so review the writing process as it relates to composing a journal entry, and learn about different forms of narratives and how to format dialogue. Right, so that's the that's assignment the first parts of assignment 35 that we're going to look at today. The parts about dialogue and different kinds of narratives. You will complete a journal entry, assignment 34, using the writing process, and apply your understanding of dialogue to complete assignment 35. And if we have time, then we'll delve into the other parts of assignment 35, but that's what we're going to focus on today. The journal entry, which is assignment 34, and your understanding of dialogue, which is assignment 35. All right, so before we get to the words of the day, I've got a couple of quotes up on the screen from two intellectuals that you may or may not have heard of, but they are I've watched a lot of YouTube videos and a few books by these people, and they've kind of given me a lot of inspiration in my life. I think it's really important to get guidance from teachers and from elders, and sometimes that happens in real life, and we get advice and guidance from people in our life, but then sometimes we get guidance and advice from people who we've never met, but we only hear their words on a screen, or we hear their words on the printed page. The man on the left is Paulo Freire. He is he's very big in the educational world. He wrote a famous book called The Pedagogy of the Oppressed, which basically means like the learning and the education of people who are oppressed. He said dialogue cannot exist without humility. So I love that phrase, right? So you can't really, like true dialogue can't really happen unless both sides are humble and don't see themselves as either more than or higher up than the other person, right? So that's the true dialogue, right? And Nhat Hanh, he's a Buddhist monk, and he's he wrote several books about Buddhism and about just being selfless and giving back to his community. He was a very respected leader. He said, in true dialogue, both sides are willing to change. And I think it's a pretty rare thing sometimes, especially these days, right? When both sides are willing to change, right? And I think all too often we can go into a conversation with someone or a meeting with people, and we're only interested in getting our voice heard, and we're only interested in getting our side of the argument across, right? And I think I like to think about writing and reading as like a dialogue, right? So when someone writes something down, even if like 1,000 years go by, the other person reads it, right? And even though those two people can't communicate directly, there's still a dialogue between the things you read and the things you write, right? So it's sort of like it's that give and that take, right? You're open to change. You're open to having your mind challenged, having your views challenged, and open to new experiences. And that's when like true learning can happen, and your life can really change, right? But you have to be open to it, and that's not always an easy thing to do, right? But I think this kind of brings me back to the 7 grandfather teachings that we had talked about at the start of this course. It's one thing to read the 7 grandfather teachings and be like, okay, yeah, got to be humble, got to be brave, you got to be, you have to love, you have to have wisdom. But then life kind of happens, and it's sometimes hard to do those things. But they're just nice reminders of the things that you can strive towards, you can move towards. So that brings me to the some words of the day. So the Anishinaabe word, one of them at least, is gaganuj, a noun, which means to talk to, have a conversation with. I think that's actually a verb. And then dialogue, a conversation between 2 or more people as a feature of a book, a play, or a film. So from the Greek dia, which means through, and logos, which means words. So through words, right? So a conversation between 2 or more people, right? That's a dialogue. We have another Anishinaabe Moan word, 2 of them, sorry. Gaganu Nindiwag, which is they talk to each other, they have a conversation. And Dibishiku is an adjective, which means just like, seems like, even, equal, directly, right? So that's the best kind of conversation, with just 2 people who are just see themselves as equals, having that give and take, that back and forth. Some related English words: conversation, another noun. Informal interchange of thoughts, information, etc., by spoken words, oral communication between persons. Latin for conversare, keep company with. So that's, conversation kind of literally means to keep company with someone, to be in their presence, right? Discussion, an act or instance of discussing. Consideration or examination by argument, comment, etc., especially to explore solutions, informal debate. From the Latin, discutere, which is investigate, right? So when we have a discussion, we are, in a way, we're having an investigation. We're having an examination. We're trying to figure something out. We may not know what it is, but we're trying to figure it out. And sometimes the discussion we have is with ourselves, and we're gonna think about that concept when we do the journal entry, right? Because when you're having a journal entry, you're having a discussion, right? And in a very real sense, you're having a discussion with yourself. And then if you go back and read some journal entries you wrote years ago, then you're having a conversation with your younger self, right? You're having a dialogue, right, so to speak, right? And again, it can't be a dialogue in real time, but it's a dialogue in a way, right? You're looking back on that younger version of you, and remembering what they were going through, and what they thought about them, and what was important to them. Okay, so on to our article of the day. How Inuit dialysis patients and a Winnipeg doctor made a breakthrough for renal care in Nunavut. Madeline Manitok, 74, undergoes peritoneal dialysis in her home in Rankin Inlet, Nunavut. Home dialysis has allowed her to stay in her Nunavut instead of getting treatment in faraway Winnipeg. So there's our headline captured. So this is telling us, how Inuit dialysis patients and a Winnipeg doctor. So we're not just talking about any patients. We are talking about dialysis patients, and not just any dialysis patients. We're talking about Inuit. So sometimes nouns are modified with multiple adjectives, and I've said this many times in the course. Adjectives are your friend in writing. I want you to use them, make your writing more descriptive, adding details. That's what it's all about, right? How Inuit dialysis patients and a Winnipeg doctor. Sorry, that's the word "and" is a conjunction, right? And so it's not just any doctor; it's a Winnipeg doctor. Made a breakthrough for renal care in Nunavut. Okay, so a, an, and the are the three articles in the English language, and there's one of them. They made a breakthrough for. That's a preposition. Prepositions tell us, relationship words. They tell us where something happened, when it happened, who it happened between, or who it happened for. In this case, it's a breakthrough for renal care in Nunavut. Let's have a little breakdown of that article to see how this language is functioning. They've actually provided you with a map in this article to show you, where she's actually located, where Rankin Inlet actually is. It's about 1,500 kilometers from Winnipeg, so very far from Winnipeg. And this is, of course, a topic that many people in the far north know, that it's not easy traveling for medical care, and especially when you have to go thousands of kilometers. So here's how the article starts. Madeline Manitok once feared a stark choice. And then they use a colon here, which is basically says and here it is, and then they give you that explanation. She could get treatment in distant Winnipeg for the rest of her life, or go without it at home. Here's how health officials got her and others in her situation a better option, right? So that's just a great way to start the article. It's a great way to lay out the information. It's just she faced a stark choice. And then we hear what that stark choice is, right? She could travel to Winnipeg for the rest of her life, or she could get care at home, or go without it at home, right? So she's got this very stark choice. And then these health officials, these doctors and these surgeons and these medical professionals step in, and they give her and people like her, an option to move forward with her life. When Madeline Manitok learned in 2019 that her kidneys were failing, she had two choices. So that's that's called an introductory phrase, and then it's it's a great way to set up the information. And then she could move into a hotel near a hemodialysis unit in Winnipeg for the rest of her life, or she could return to her family in central Nunavut and die. So again, that's that stark choice that she was given, right? So she could either move there, uproot herself from her community, or pretty much accept that she wouldn't receive the care she needed, and that would be the end of her. So then we get a quote from someone in the story. I found out that I couldn't go home if I wanted to live, she said. So here's where we're getting into the use of quotation marks, and that's what we're going to talk about today. So just the way we use quotation marks, right? So the first quotation mark signifies that someone else is talking who's not the author. I found out that I couldn't go home if I wanted to live, and then the quotation mark. So the comma or the other quotation mark goes first, and then the closing quotation mark goes second, right? And that's one of the biggest things to keep in mind is that, the punctuation goes inside the quotation mark. If you end the sentence, you put the period inside the quotation mark, and then the quotation mark is the last thing that's part of that sentence. Then we get what's called a dialogue tag or a slug, and that just tells us who said it, how they said it, when they said it, that kind of thing, right? So in this case, it's simply she said. And then we get a quote from the person in the story. I was devastated, right? So again, we have the quotation mark, then the period, and then the quotation mark. And more on that in a second, okay? So when you learn to format when you format dialogue, like if you're writing a short story or you're writing, a newspaper article that has quotes from people in it, there's a proper way to format it, and that's what we're going to look at for the next assignment, or sorry, the assignment after this one. But there's a very particular way of doing it, and the best way to do it is just to look at someone who's done it already and just model it after their practice, right? You just need to know a few simple rules, and then once you have those rules down, it becomes pretty straightforward and easy to figure out. All right, assignment 34 is a journal entry. It's the importance of reflection. So thinking back to our discussion yesterday about subject, audience, and purpose, your subject is how important or not you feel it is to reflect on what you learn as you go through this course. You may think these journal entries, reflections, another name for the journal entry is a reflection, are a complete waste of time because you are not really assessing your skills as you go along, or perhaps you have not set any goals, so you are not meeting them. Then again, you may think that this journaling business is quite handy because it allows you to demonstrate and discuss your personal growth in reading and writing. Your purpose, again, is to, right, so the subject matter, right, so that's what you're talking about, is, how important it is for you to reflect or not, right? So we're talking about the art of reflection through journal entries. Do you feel it's important? Why or why not? Your purpose is to inform your audience of how important or not you feel it is to reflect on your goals and your growth in literacy, right? So that's your purpose here, is to inform us of that, right? Your audience is your teacher, and it's also yourself, right? So, I would say that your audience is your teacher, and it's also yourself, as all journal entries are, right? Most journal entries are written for ourselves, right? But sometimes, we do share them with other people, especially if it's for an assignment. You can choose your tone and your style, okay? So that's up to you. You can choose how you write about this, right? If you want to be funny, playful, if you want to be serious, I don't know, contemplative. What are the good words could we use here? Stoic, right? I like that word. Just accepting of the way things are, and not just like giving up, but like just accepting things for the way they are. That's kind of like the Stoic philosophy, right? It's just like accepting the things that you can't change, and it's kind of like the Serenity Prayer that you see in AA programs, right? It's having the acceptance of the things you can't change, and like the courage to go out there and change the ones that you can change, and the wisdom to know the difference. So funny, playful, serious, contemplative. Yeah, it's up to you. The style you want to write in, and it's worth 15 marks. Okay, so we got to keep in mind a couple of things here for this assignment. So let's practice that writing process. Assignment 34. We'll do some planning and some outlining or some brainstorming, whatever way you want to look at that. So we need to, you know, answer yourself this question, okay? Do I think reflecting through journal entries is useful? All right, so why or why not? Okay, so that's the big question, right? You got to answer you got to answer that and that's going to give you, so that's what I would suggest you to do. Just pose that question to yourself. Do I think reflecting through journal entries is useful? Why or why not? Right? And then you could just simply say, like, you know, yes. And then some point form, you know, helps me, you know, track my thinking. It helps me set goals. Yeah, I try to think of at least 3 things that, you know, it does. And then, you know, maybe I can compare my writing. You know, new versus old. Helps me vent, right? Or maybe get out some negative emotions, right? Or because that, I mean, that's kind of an interesting way of looking at it, right? So you sometimes it's almost like exercise, right? Like you may not like exercise, but you like how it makes you feel afterwards, and you like how maybe you like how it makes you look afterwards, right? And you like the impact it has on your mental health, right? So maybe that's something you could think about too. It's like, you know, like, you know, I'll just put another comment down here, like, you know, don't like doing it, but like the results, or enjoy. You enjoy the results, right? So that's one way of looking at it, right? So, and so once you've got that brainstorming session down, right, you've answered that question. You know, do you think reflecting is useful? Why or why not? And then you say yes or no, and then write down a bunch of answers for it. Inform your audience of how important or not you feel it is to reflect on your goals and your growth in literacy, right? So now I want to mention, you know, I've talked about this before, and we talked about it yesterday, about, you know, going from the general to the specific, right? Going from, you know, just getting a general idea down, and then dialing it into a more specific level. So you could say, you know, yes, you know, using that rap rock method we've talked about in this class, you know, restate the question, right? So yes, I find journal entries useful because they, you know, and then list some of these reasons, right? They help me vent some emotions I've been having. They help me track my thinking, right? But then what you want to do is you want to, you know, you want to restate the question as an answer. So yes, I ... and then, right, so that's going to be your first sentence right there. So sentence 1 is going to be me restating the question. Sentence 2, 3, 4, you know, 5 and beyond, these are going to be, and this is I'm kind of like doing like a little sentence or a little paragraph builder here. You know, I'm going to talk about, I'm going to do venting examples. A goal I have set. And then maybe a sentence about comparing my writing. And then that way I've given myself a roadmap for going forward. And then I'm just going to fill in the blanks, and I'm going to see where it takes me. And then once I have that initial paragraph written, then I'll see how it goes. And, you know, your journal entries, they aren't as formal as, you know, some of your other assignments. And, you know, I don't expect you to, I mean, I don't want you to write in point form for the journal entries. They should be fully, these documents should be written out in full. They should not be written in point form. But that being said, you know, you should plan them out a little bit, and I think it might help you get started, and it might help you finish, right? So even more important, right? So that's what I would do. Instead of just jumping right into the writing, you know, you jot down your ideas, you jot down your notes, you see where they take you, and then you just let the pen fly, or just start typing on your laptop, see where it goes, and once you've got all the ideas down, then you may just want to wrap it up and say, like, yep, I got everything done there. And then, you know, and then once you've got everything down on the page, then you know that you may need to add some more stuff. And this, just the act of writing it down may jog your memory, and you may think of some stuff to include, okay? So, yeah. Okay, so, all right, so I would like to start our discussion of Unit 2, Lesson 6, Assignment 35. So this is fiction versus nonfiction. So again, it's 52 marks in total, so it's going to take us a couple of classes to work through it all. Exercise 1 is about punctuating dialogue and direct quotations. And this is directly from our unit handout, right? So it's, you know, it's a dozen rules -3 page to help you punctuate the following dialogue, right? So use that page in your unit handout to help you with this, and of course I'll guide you through it now. The first 2 lines have been done for you. Do not forget to capitalize some words as well. So that's another key consideration here when we capitalize. When we're writing dialogue and when we're editing dialogue. So in this case, you're sort of like an editor, and you're editing some dialogue that needs to be fixed. There's mistakes put in here on purpose, so you're going to go in there and fix some of them. So again, the first 2 lines have been done for you. The first 2 lines are like a model for how it should have been done. And yeah, we'll just jump in from there. Okay, so I'm gonna give you a few examples here. So both parts of a divided quotation are enclosed in quotation marks. The first word of the second part is not capitalized unless it begins a new sentence. So the quote is, so this is what someone said: "This soup tastes just like my kokum," right? And so what we do here is we, since this quote starts off, it starts off right here is, you know, this soup, right? So the quotation mark starts it off. This soup, and then so we put a comma, and then a quotation mark, and then in the middle we have what we call the speaker tag, sometimes called a tag, sometimes called a slug. The elder said, right? And then another comma. And then the quote picks up again, so quotation mark. Tastes just like my kokum. And then, since this is the end of the quotation, we've got the period here. And then it ends with the quotation mark. So, I mean, the key thing to keep in mind here is that the quotation marks, you know, they go on the inside, right? That's at the end of the quotation mark, at the end of the quotation, right? So, so you know, when the quote is stopped, you know, you put the quotation marks on the inside of the quotation marks. Yeah, so hopefully that makes sense. You just had to look at a few examples to understand how it works. So when writing only a part of a quoted sentence, that's when you're doing like a research essay, for example, do not begin the quotation with a capital letter unless the person you are quoting capitalized it, or the first word, or it's the first word in your sentence. Okay, so so sometimes when you have a quoted sentence, you can have someone's words can be included in your writing. So in this case, Robert Checkwich admitted that he had not found many novels, quote, that were based in First Nation communities. Oh, whoops, and there's the, made a mistake there on purpose, right? So the period goes here, right? So, so it goes period, then the double quotation mark, and the first quotation mark just signals that somebody else is talking, and the second quotation mark just signifies that what they've said is now over. All right, so this is what I was talking about earlier. This is the guidelines from the unit handout. Okay, so so we have, you know, when you write dialogue, begin a new paragraph whenever the speaker changes. So that's a very foundational concept to keep in mind here, right? So when somebody new is speaking, like, so if it's two people going back and forth, you put a new line for, or sorry, it's a new line for every time the speaker changes, right? So in a sense, it's a new paragraph, right? So the first one reads, "Sit down," she said. "Let's talk. Are you going to do this every day?" So just like we've seen before, we start with a quotation mark. Then we have what the person said, "Sit down." Then we, you know, if the sentence continues from there, if the sentence isn't over, you've got to put a comma. Okay, so it's what they said, comma, quotation mark, and then, you know, she said, or, you know, she said suddenly, or she said while sitting down, right? You could have anything here, right? So, sit down, she said, period, right? You could put a comma after said and add more information, but sometimes you can just simply say, you know, sit down, she said, period. And then her quote picks up, quotation mark, "Let's talk. Are you going to do this every day?" Now, in this case, it's a question. So the question mark goes inside. The question mark goes inside the quotation, and the quotation mark goes on the outside, right? So when the quote is over, you know, the punctuation mark ends it. You know, when the quote is over, when the quote and the sentence are over, that'd be a good way. Yeah. So the quote and the sentence are over. The punctuation goes period, and then quotation mark. Or it can go question mark, quotation mark, or exclamation mark. Let's just move that over here, right? So one of those variations, right? It's going to be, but in all cases, when the sentence is over and the quote is over, the punctuation mark comes first, the period, exclamation mark, or the question mark, and then we get the quotation. And so you see how, so she said this, and then we get a space, and then we get what. So we know that that's someone else speaking. And then the new paragraph says, what do you mean, what? And we know that that's her speaking. And then he said nothing. He knew it was his best defense. And then if you're not going to talk to me, you can just sit there. So when you're ready to talk, let me know. She went back to the desk to work. Jimmy sat. Okay? So every time a new speaker speaks, then we get a new paragraph. Use a pair of dashes to indicate an abrupt break in a thought or speech, or an unfinished statement or question. Okay, so so sometimes you can do that, right? You can use a dash. So in this case, we have first of all, comma, quotation mark. He said, comma. If you can learn a simple trick, son, you'll get along better with all kinds of folks. You never really understand a person until you consider things from his point of view. And then we get the dash right here, and the dash means that he was trailed off, or in this case he was cut off, because a new speaker comes in and says, huh? Quotation mark, huh? Question mark, and then the other quotation mark, and then we have the other dash here, until you walk 2 moons in his moccasins, right? So that's the, he's continuing his thought. He's continuing what he wanted to say. All right, so, and then here's the example from the, from the textbook for this question, right? So you've got the first 2 lines have been done for you, right? Just going back to the assignment criteria, right? So the first 2 lines are done for you, and then you have to take it from there and sort of fix it from that point in. So the first 2 ones are done correctly. Hey Kelly, Frank said, what's up? Hey Frank, I'm just sitting around, hanging out, she replied. And then we see in that third line, we know it's a new speaker. We don't see any quotation marks, so I'll give you a couple of hints. And glancing at this page, I can see there's many missing punctuation marks. There's many words that need to be capitalized, that should be capitalized, right? And so you just got to pay attention to, what is being actually said, out loud. All of that needs to be in quotation mark. So all of that needs to be in quotation marks. So find out what the characters actually said, right? So nobody said he said, or she exclaimed, or he replied, or Kelly said, right? But those are the speaker tags. They're the things that help us understand who said it, not what was actually said. So find out what was actually said by the characters, and then put those in quotation marks, and then add the punctuation and the quotation marks accordingly, right? Add the formatting that needs to be in there. And that just continues on, right? So just think about where the commas need to go. Think about where the periods need to go. Make sure you've got quotation marks to start the quote and one to end it. Make sure you capitalize anything that starts a new line, right? So the first word of that new line should always be capitalized. So that's, hint hint, that should get you on the right track there. Yeah, so I think don't really have time to go into this article here. I think I kind of spent a little bit more time on that dialogue assignment that I wanted to, but I think it's very important, especially if you want to if you ever see yourself writing fiction, or if you see yourself wanting to write a memoir or write a story. Right? You're gonna want to have some dialogue in there, right? You're gonna want to have some quotes from people, and it does make your writing come alive, right? When you've got quotes from other people, when you've got you know and dialogue is really interesting, right? To have that interaction going back and forth between speakers, to see what people are saying, to see and it's actually really hard to write dialogue, right? Let alone formatting, right? So it's very hard to write dialogue that sounds kind of convincing. And I remember reading once in a book about being an editor and working at a company that would read stories written by people and deciding who would get published and who wouldn't. And a lot of the time, they would go right to the person's ability to write dialogue. And if the dialogue didn't sound like real dialogue, if it didn't sound like the way people would really talk, then they wouldn't publish it, and they would kind of move on to the next submission. So just a quick recap. He said I want you to punctuate your dialogue, comma, said the teacher. I will try my best, comma, quotation mark, replied the student. Right? So, you start a new line, you capitalize the first word, and then, it will get easier with time. And that second and that last line, we don't need to say said the teacher, because we already know it's the teacher, because we've got the two people talking, the student and the teacher. But we do put the period first, and then we put the quotation mark second, right? Okay, so I think that's a good place to wrap things up for today. Thank you for tuning in, and we will continue our discussion tomorrow.